Oh, hello. And welcome to Sounding Board, the podcast about freedom and capitalism, and conservatism and socialism. Yeah. So why the Jeremy Corbyn mask? And if I may take off the "Make America Great Again" hat.
It's not really on, to be honest, Nick.
This is your head is tiny, and I can only imagine it's because you've got a small brain.
No. Look at that. Perfect.
No. Anyway, why the props?
So I wanted to talk about the left and the right.
Okay.
And more specifically, the differences between leftists and rightists and people who tend to be on one side or the other.
Okay.
So I thought we'd start off by just defining the difference between left and right. I know we've done it a couple of times before with left-right games and that kind of thing, but I wanted to get a definition down.
You like doing this, don't you? You like just keeping going with the subject until you can define it in the most succinct way you can.
Well, yeah, so it's how I write code. So you've probably heard of test-driven development, but for the benefit of our special friend, when you're writing code, if you're trying to do it properly, what you'll do is you'll write a series of tests first, so that you know when your code passes that test or those tests, you're done and you can move on to something else.
Yeah.
So what you do is you write these tests. You then write code just to pass the test. You're not worried about how good your code is at this point. All you're doing is just writing to pass the tests. Once all the tests are green and they're all passed, you then go back into your code and you do this kind of refactoring loop where you'll think, okay, I can remove that section, or I'm repeating myself here. Make a small change, see if it passes the test again, and then make another small change and keep doing this loop of refactoring and refactoring until you get some nice clean code. And that's kind of what I did with my definition. So I'd start off with trying to define the left and the right, and then I just try and shrink it down and say, okay, well
simplify.
That's not needed, or that's too confusing. So if I give you my succinct definition, or just differences between the left and the right, and then hear me out, and then we'll perhaps unpack it afterwards. Okay. So the right, I think, can be boiled down to elite control. And the left...
2 words you got there for your definition.
I think you can break this down into public ownership. And you'll notice that the words state and government are conspicuous due to their absence.
Yes.
But that honestly wasn't intentional. They were in there to start off with, but I couldn't get a broad enough range of people.
So I'm going to start with left then.
Okay. Public
ownership.
Yes.
So you've chosen. I'm just literally going to critique your definition.
Sure. That's what we're here for.
Public, not collective ownership, or do you see those terms as being fairly interchangeable in this case?
I saw public to mean collective, but having the word collective in it is possibly a better definition.
Have I just improved your definition? Collective ownership.
You have.
That's why you should have talked to me first. That's why we do it on the podcast. Okay, collective ownership. I like that. I guess
collective meaning everybody though. So it's not just like you and I and a few other people will own something. That's still collective ownership. But it needs to be everyone owning it, which is why I kind of erred towards the word public.
Yeah. Okay. But again, you can only do this when you're talking about a discrete group anyway. It's not just you have to look at a town, a country, or whatever to say that they are acting in this way in order to use this definition. So the size of the collective, the size of the public, it's either that or you're meaning public by meaning everyone.
Yes.
Yeah. As opposed to just a specific small any size group within an existing framework. So public meaning everyone. Okay. In which case we'll go back to.
And the reason that I didn't include the word state or government in there, is because that doesn't include your libertarian. There's no such thing as libertarian. You're anarchists.
Don't even. Yeah.
Yeah, you're anarcho-communists. These people who just want complete democratic control of everything, but they don't want a state. So this still includes them.
Yeah. Okay.
Although the vast majority of leftists will use the state as a proxy for the people.
Yes.
So this includes both.
And I suppose this is... You could almost... Well, I agree, and you could almost again replace public there with people's.
Yeah, you could.
People's ownership, but again, that's a weighty word.
I quite like that though.
Yeah, but the reason for even saying that is because it's a loaded term, isn't it? And I've written about this on the blog and stuff as well, about the people's this and the people's that. And Boris Johnson has basically been trolling it, hasn't he, since winning the election.
People's government.
People's government and all this kind of stuff. And there's just a part of me is like, I really hope you're doing this because it's funny.
Well, I really hope he is trolling.
Rather than
it's
being
not as
genuine.
obvious as when, for example, Donald Trump trolls people.
Yeah. Well, we've spoken about this before
he's
as
the
well.
master.
Yeah, but I don't even think he knows he's doing it. I think it's natural to him. It's just natural to him. It's like asking Usain Bolt to run. He doesn't know how he gets that fast. He just gets that fast. That's just the words come out of Donald Trump's mouth, or he types them on his phone, and out comes a tweet. But anyway, that aside.
So are you reasonably happy with my left definition?
Ownership is so important in this, and I think I would want to qualify some of these things with just to define that the opposites don't even exist. This is public ownership, but you don't own anything. You could almost define it by a negative in terms of saying no private property. That would be another way of defining the left. In extreme terms, the left could be defined as nothing private.
I nearly had no private property, but it was too many words.
You're just trying to get it down to two. Okay, but as long as you feel I'm on the right lines there.
Absolutely.
In the definition. Okay, and then your right was elite control.
Elite control, yeah. And the reason
that's really funny. I've got a customer called Elite Control Systems or something.
Have you?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So the reason that didn't have the state or government in there, is because it's not always the state.
Yeah.
So, rightists tend to be quite fond of the royal family. It could be a monarchy. Rich landowners. They just want this elite to be in control. They're probably quite happy for it to be a state, but it includes the monarchy. It can include the hereditary peers in the House of Lords and the bishops from the Church of England and these people. They're reasonably happy with that.
Okay, a lot of that can be grouped under conservatism more specifically, as in upholding our traditions and all that kind of stuff. And these old institutions that have been part of the kind of fabric of our country for a while.
Yeah, and I see that. The conservatism is traditionally on the right.
Yeah,
it's the control though, as opposed to the ownership.
Okay,
that was the difference.
My critique is going to be that you haven't used the word order.
I was hoping that would be implicit in control.
Elite order sounds inherently more sinister, I think, and rightly so.
Yeah, that could
order imposed by an elite is more how I think of the right. It absolutely involves control, but I think it's about the outcome. They want order. It's about having things lined up neatly with the right wingers. And I assume you're going to come on to methods and intent and stuff in a bit. But I think just
I like elite order because that sounds really sinister.
Yeah, well, look, we can't let the right wingers get away with sounding too good on this. I see there is I'm forgetting the word, but basically it's the infantilism. It's the
paternalism.
Paternalism, that's the word. Thank you. That's a right wing thing, and it's again a lot of this came out of the EU referendum, or rather, what's happened since. This concept that we voted the wrong way. And people like Matthew Parris coming out going, no, this is not our democracy. I know that's direct democracy, but I believe in representative democracy, and that is you put me in charge because I know more than you. That's right. That's the right wing, isn't it? And this is where I think the Liberal Democrats don't get anywhere near the the labelling of being right wing, and they are massively right wing in that way, aren't they? In terms of it's their way or the highway, and do you know what, you can say whatever you like, but it's what I want, not what you want. So the notion of well, I suppose again it's liberal representative Democrat if you want to put it in there as the term that Matthew Parrish used about it, but yeah, okay, elite order. Is that what we settled on there?
Yeah, I think so. So I thought what we'd do now we've defined the left and right. I mean, we could give examples. Most people, you could say it could be, state ownership mostly for the left.
State
control or state order for the right.
And this is the other thing I want to get across.
Things like regulation are firmly on the
licensing.
Right. Licensing, whereas the National Health Service and just nationalised industry in general is on the left.
Is it worth just again mentioning for the listener and viewer that's not a regular of Sounding Board that this isn't a right wing podcast. This is we will rail against the left because it's almost easier, and there are more comic figures
and the right aren't exactly a threat at the moment, are they?
Exactly. You say that, but we could talk. That's a topic for a podcast. But there's a different spectrum of authoritarianism, which, as far as we're concerned, includes both the left and the right. Statism and freedom and liberty on the other end. And that's not the spectrum we're talking about here. We're talking about left and right in political terms. And the fact that there are some key differences, but they do also share a love of the state. Even again, as you say, even the anarcho-communists, they think you can do this without a state, but you can't do any of their versions of anything without a very strong elite. And as I say, I suppose the point is it's elitism, it's not necessarily statism. Anyway, just want to get that other definition out of the way because it's not just as simple as one paradigm.
So I thought what we'd talk about now is differences between the right and the left.
Yep.
So I've got a few different different differences. So the right, they tend to like to find solutions to problems. Their solutions often they always mean more authoritarianism.
Yeah.
We will categorise and we will put controls around and we'll establish order. But when faced with a problem, they tend to acknowledge it at least, and they will try to fix this problem. The left don't really like to acknowledge issues at all, and I know we touched on it on our last podcast, in that you can give an example to a left winger, who has come up with a policy for something, and you can say, okay, well, what if this happens? And they'll often just call you a bigot, try and shut you down. They won't even acknowledge that the problem exists. So the example we talked about last time was, say, the left very much at the moment like to talk about self-identifying. So you can self-identify as
whatever you like,
a woman or a child or whatever.
Yeah.
But then if you say, okay, so what if I self-identified as a woman and entered a powerlifting competition and smashed the competition? What would happen then? And they just don't want to talk about it.
They'll avoid the conversation.
They absolutely avoid it. So I think that's one of the differences between the right and the left. The left just won't even acknowledge lots of these issues.
But you see, I think you've struck upon something quite specific there, which is the identitarian side of the left. Identity politics is far more prevalent on the left, at least at the moment. I can't think of too much.
The far right do it as well.
Yeah.
And so the whole order around the right is, part of it is, I'm British, and this is my tribe, my clan, and they don't necessarily like other clans and other tribes. And certainly on the alt-right, they've been seeing how the left has been playing identity politics.
Yes, I think that's
they're playing their own game, but they're not playing to lose; they're playing to win.
Yes, yeah. But do you think that the far right? I mean, again, define far right. In the groups that you're talking about, Who are they? Do you know, I have a problem with throwing these terms out there.
Well, so the far right, I would see as moving towards fascism. So people who want really strict border controls. No one getting in. Really heavy regulation. These types of people.
Right. Okay. But you not got any particular people in mind you could use as examples of this.
Well, no, because as I said, there don't really appear to be too many.
Because I think it's a bit of a myth.
Too many on the in Britain.
I think
even if you look at, for example, the BNP, who people would call the far right. Look at their policies, and they're left.
Yeah.
It is left plus racism.
Yeah. I don't want to.
Richard Spencer in America, that kind of people. These are the alt right.
Yeah. Okay.
I think they're identitarian as well.
Yeah. But as you say, I think it's because they want to try and beat them at their own game. And it's because of the inherent contradictions of identity politics and this, intersectionalism and all of that. Okay.
So that was one of them. Another one, and this is, I know you wanted to talk about this because I've mentioned this a couple of podcasts ago, and you've mentioned it back to me several times. So I think it must have triggered something. So the right,
trigger warning,
would like to be to concentrate on outcomes and be judged on outcomes.
Yes.
Whereas the left only ever wants to be judged on intentions.
Yeah. I think this is such an important point. I think we could do a whole podcast on,
because I spoke about the greater good intention.
The greater good intention.
You never know what's going to happen.
I think it's a great term.
You might think this is what's going to happen. Nobody knows. You don't know what's going to happen when you do something.
Yeah.
For example, when you try and implement socialism, for example, lots of people think, "Oh, this is going to be great. We're going to take the base that capitalism has given us, and then we're going to supercharge the economy, and everyone's going to be lined up in the right direction, and everyone's going to be better off."
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen. But you also don't know what would have happened had you not have done any of that as well.
Yeah.
So who knows? But the left is just, I believe in helping the poor, therefore I'm going to nationalise everything.
Yeah. There is
but
just
I don't want to help the poor.
There is just a default assumption, and again, this comes back to good old Theresa May with her nasty party jibe about the Tories, wasn't it? There's just this perception, and it's certainly one that the left and the parties of the left like to peddle constantly, which is that they are good and the right is just evil and nasty and mean. Mean is one of those things. They want and obviously it's very easy to be the opposite of mean if you're just splashing the cash on all of these groups of people that you want to spend money on, the deserving poor or whatever. It's not even that, is it? But yeah, I think that.
And the left have got them on this. The left have got them because they, their kind of starting assumption is that the state is good. Therefore, the more the state does, and the most it can do is own everything, the greater it is, the better outcome that will happen. That's what they're saying. Whereas the right are saying, well, no, it's not always about the state, but you are the state, and they're not arguing for less state. So they're in a really tricky situation.
All they've got left is managerialism. That's
We're
all
better
they've
at
got
it
left.
than you are.
Yeah, that's it. That is absolutely it. And it always comes down to the Conservative Party better at managing the economy or whatever.
And don't you think that's 100% Boris Johnson?
Oh yeah, I mean, but I've said this before. He's about him. He is centrist. I sent you a link to an article that said he's the heir to Blair, and I was like, I bloody said that. Yeah, that's what he is.
He loves his public services, including his nationalised public services.
Exactly.
He just wants to run them better.
Yeah, but that's all they've got left. They can't win an argument, as you say. They can't win an argument on status, and they can't eschew the values of capitalism too much, and they can't certainly do it on its own merits. They certainly can't talk about the morality of capitalism. They can only talk about the immorality of socialism, because again,
they'll talk about capitalism by its economic virtues, and not its moral virtues.
And the evidence of it raising people up in terms of bringing people out of poverty. But again, because they need to fund the state that they are running, so they can't go hell for leather on it. And I think it's a tightrope that, I don't know. I think I think a lot of them know they're walking it. I think a lot of them know they just have to go a little bit to this side, a little bit to that side. Not too far. Don't go too far. That sounds a bit socialist. Not too far. You'd have to give up the whole state. I think that's where a lot of them are. I think they get it, but I think they want to win, and I think they want to rule. Hence the elite and the order and the control.
I think some of them are probably like that. I'm not sure a lot of them are that bright.
No, I agree. I think those are the clever ones, and I think the bulk of MPs of all parties are followers, and in it for a quick buck, and in it to be part of the tribe, and have a position locally and all this kind of stuff. I think that's mainly all it is for them.
You mentioned something just then, which kind of triggered something in me.
Another trigger warning.
You mentioned wanting to win the argument.
Yes.
And that's something, and this is more of a difference between, and this is probably the kind of top to bottom axis. So you've got the authoritarians and the libertarians like us. Authoritarians, both on the left and the right, will try and win arguments, and they'll always try and have a debate about something. I mean the left probably more. They talk about the trans debate, for example.
Right.
It's always a debate. It's never a dialectic. And again, for the benefit of our special friend, if you don't know the difference between these two, because it's nuanced. So a debate is when you go into an argument and you try and win it.
Yeah.
That's the outcome you want.
You have a side.
You have a side. You have a tribe. You want to destroy the opponent. You want to win. That's the aim of a debate.
Yeah.
A dialectic is two or more people coming together, and the outcome needs to be the truth.
Yes.
So you and I will discuss stuff. Like my definition at the beginning.
To try and improve it.
And we'll try and improve it, and we'll try to get the best outcome possible.
Yeah.
And there are different sorts of people. So there are some people who, when presented with a differing but better argument, will have it will make them happy. So I've just improved it. That's great.
Yeah.
Like I was when you said it's elite order.
Yeah.
As opposed to elite control. That's much better.
Yeah.
Whereas other people are like, no. I just want to win. No, this is my opinion. I'm not going to change my opinion. I'm going to work back from that. And that's probably more on the left, because they'll have their right. Okay, the state must control everything, and they will. They'll never. You can present them with all the evidence in the world that it has never worked.
I think.
And they won't roll back. Whereas right wingers are more likely to roll back their regulation. So okay, well perhaps it's a little bit too much. We'll perhaps have a little bit less regulation.
I'll believe that when I see it, but I think in terms of rolling back regulation.
Well, so this is my argument that the people who tend to be viewed as on the right at the moment aren't really on the right.
And we've said this before as well. It's all very left at the moment.
Whereas if you look at, say, more conservatives in the 1980s, for example, they were probably a bit more right wing, and they're probably a bit more willing to roll back regulation.
Trump said something. I mean, he says all sorts of stuff, and I'm not sure what he will choose a source for his stats that's not necessarily amazing. But hasn't he talked about, for every new regulation they've cut 25 or something? And I'm sure he said this week. I'd like to know more about that kind of thing, because again, this is a bit like there were so many stats in the run-up to the EU referendum, and I mean in the years, not just in the campaign. Nigel Farage would come out with a stat about the number of laws that came out of Brussels versus the number of laws that were made in the House of Commons in the UK, or statutes or pages or words, and loads of different stats have come out, because it's actually quite difficult to quantify these things. And one law can have many effects. One law could be one page, I wish, or it could be absolutely reams and reams and reams.
Well, so that's the difficulty particularly with Britain in the EU. So what would happen is the EU would produce a law or a regulation, and countries within the EU are invited to interpret that in different ways, because they're not clear cut, these things. So
certainly the regulations.
So countries have to interpret them. Britain always gold plates them. They'll always go far further than they needed to. They could have massively liberalised the economy whilst staying in the EU.
Yes.
But they never did.
Yeah.
So that's an issue with British politics. So the issue with a lot of the laws coming from the EU, the issue isn't just with the EU. The issue is the way that it's implemented by British politicians who just gold plate everything.
But you see, this is the bureaucracy. This is the agencies, the quangos. This is the civil service. This is the state, and certainly public officials, and the leaders of them that do this. And that's. I mean, there's this talk of the deep state, isn't there? And there's, I've talked to people about how Dominic Cummings is trying to hire his misfits and his weirdos and whatever in order to try and do some fairly major reform of the civil service and the government departments and all this. But then I'm also hearing it's now being rowed back from just because it's too difficult. And you just think that this march of the institutions, this march of the bureaucrats and the arm's length and the appointed rather than elected, I just don't see anyone in our lifetime getting into power that rolls any of it back.
No, it's a pipe dream.
That argument has been completely lost, and unless a close neighbour, I think the only way we'd get it in this country to say that we rely on another country to show us, and obviously there are countries that are freer in terms of regulation than us, but they tend to be quite far away.
Thinking like Singapore or Hong Kong,
exactly.
Or places.
And so, if I think a closer European neighbour were to liberalise more, were to deregulate, proper deregulation, not the kind of deregulation that someone puts on their platform to win, and it ends up being that they write twice as much regulation in the process. Deregulation is their code for smarter regulation, good regulation. I had a rather stupid conversation with someone on LinkedIn the other day.
That does surprise me.
But I mean, I am LinkedIn is a business platform. I use it to shill for business and to say, this is what my company's doing. But I do it to be provocative about business as well, and I specifically go after regulation. And so I will be out and out for no regulation. And then someone pops up and it's just like, and I'll say, oh well, yeah, but good regulation.
That's you, but for our listener on the podcast, that's you pretending to be a fisherman.
Yes, yeah, sorry.
Casting your hook out.
And that someone will pop up going, oh yeah, but there's good regulation. And it's such an easy argument to unpick. How do you make sure the regulation is good? Good for who? And do you to have to rely on your guys being in charge in order to do it? And also, by the way, do you think that anyone who writes a regulation thinks it's bad? They all think it's good. It's just you disagree with them. But yeah, the idea that maybe another country would deregulate by actually getting rid of these quangos and these other institutions, see an economic benefit from it, then I think that is basically the only way that a right-wing government, or rather the Conservative Party in their current form, which is not, which is very much the a la cartist left and right, it's the only way I think they might be able to get away with saying, look over there at Finland or whatever, they've tried this. Because they've done this before, haven't they? Free schools policies and stuff like this. We're borrowing best practice. Look, they do it over there. Let's come and do that over here. I can't think of an example particularly where the left do that, other than just in general them talking about redistributive policies. They won't talk about something very specific. They won't talk about telecoms or roads or whatever. They'll just go, oh well, they share out more money in Sweden, so we should. But
they'll point to the latest socialist project in the early years when it's going well. I mean, they all point to Venezuela.
Yeah. Not anymore.
No, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Not Russia anymore. Not China anymore. Not.
Yep.
It's
Cuba.
going on Albania, Poland, Lithuania.
Yeah. But the idea that, again, the reason I say it's only a right-wing government do it is that the idea that there is evidence for something, they can sell that. They like the idea of selling, and they like the idea that they are better salesmen. And this is this managerialism again. This is that we're not the scary socialists. You can trust us. We will look after you, but not because we're going to own you. That would be wrong.
And I think one of the reasons the right and the left differ in this way is that if you're on the right, there are degrees of being on the right. So you can have, let's say you like regulation. There can be degrees. You could like light touch, laissez-faire regulation, and then there's the real kind of, if you think of sort of Germany in the last century, when it was fascist with its cartels.
Yes.
That's the other opposite, and you can kind of keep going a little bit more to the right, a little bit more to the right, a little bit more to the right. Maybe evidence is given to you to suggest that it's the less regulation is good, so you might row back a little bit, and you can do that. Yeah. When you're on the left, it's like, okay, the state should own stuff, therefore the state should own everything, and that's it. There's no shades of grey. You basically drop off a cliff as soon as you establish that the state should own stuff. Well, why doesn't it own everything?
This was the subject of our last podcast, wasn't it? I mean, this was your point of that, was there is a ratchet, meaning that you can't go back, meaning that the only way is to go forward, and to just have more of the state, more socialism, more ownership. I think you're right. I think
the principle's more kind of binary on the left. I think it is. It's either all or nothing. Whereas on the right, it's like, well, we can ratchet regulation back, but it's difficult to ratchet state ownership back.
Okay. Have you got any more specifics on the left and the right? Because I'm just.
Well, you have. I had the one that you told me.
Oh right, yeah. You asked me for one more at the end.
Yeah. Because I had a couple, and you said, "What about the difference between the somewheres and the anywheres?" Which I found really intriguing because I didn't think of that.
Well, so again, this was right before this. I didn't know we were going to talk about left and right, and you went, "I'm going to talk about the left and right. I just need another example of what's left and what's right." And it was borders that came to mind straight away. The best way of illustrating borders at the moment is to use the term free movement of people. The four freedoms of the EU, the movement of money, capital, goods and services. Is that right? And let's be clear that the services bit, I mean, it just does not exist. There absolutely is not there. And David Cameron tried to complete the free market, the single market of services. I mean, it's just utter nonsense. But the borderless EU. Or rather,
it's got a pretty substantial border around it. I think you'll find.
That's a wider point, and I suppose a point we can bring up when we talk about the EU. But the somewheres and the anywheres is, I feel a sense of belonging to where I am and where I come from. The somewheres. And you can put, a smaller community stance on that.
So I'm British, I'm English,
I'm from Cambridgeshire. Exactly. Or the opposite is the globalist. But again, this is where we'll get to the specifics of the difference between that and the European in a minute, and how it's all nonsense. But the idea that it doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter where you're from. I should be able to go anywhere, anyone should be able to come here, and I want that freedom, and they'll use the term freedom, quite rightly I suppose, to go anywhere and to be anyone. But it's having less a sense of belonging to a country or to a place than the whole world. And to say this is just about the whole world. And I use the term place there quite specifically, okay, because we've talked about the tribalism of the group and the group identity. But even though they love the idea of these group identities for sex and gender and race and class, no one ever talks about class anymore, but it's
well,
there.
Yeah, so those three have replaced class, haven't they?
Yeah, they're different forms of class. But they don't talk about place. They don't talk about location in that same way.
Well, you made the good point earlier. Again, this was because before we were on air, that it's the anywheres could just as easily be described as the nowheres.
Yes, and I think that to say you're a citizen of nowhere if you are just a citizen of the world, I think is an important point. You can say it's positive and negative spin on it.
Well, it's like, whenever people talk about things like this, I always think of what's that superhero film, the cartoon superhero film, The Incredibles.
Yeah.
When there's Dash, there's a little kid at school and he's like the fastest in the world, and he's not allowed to use his superpowers, and he's told that everyone is special, and he's like, that just means that nobody is.
Yes.
It's a little kid, and it's exactly the same thing.
Just another way of saying nobody is. Yeah, absolutely. And the Somewheres Then Anywheres, it did come out in the EU debate. I think more probably a bit afterwards, when Theresa May was Prime Minister, and she used these terms in a speech, and so it kind of came up again. But certainly before, leavers were described as little Englanders. There were these put downs. You want to pull up the drawbridge. All these terms were used.
This is why I think the leftists got it completely wrong. So the original.
Don't mix up left with Remain here, but I know what you're getting at.
Well, no, but the leftist Remainers.
Yes.
Which are a large proportion of them.
Yes, they are.
I think they got it completely wrong.
Yeah.
Because if you look at traditional Eurosceptics, they're all of the left.
Yeah.
You people like Tony Benn and Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
All on the left, because they saw the EU correctly, I think, as a right-wing project. You talk about the drawbridge being pulled, pulling up the drawbridge. The drawbridge around the EU has already been drawn up.
Exactly. There was a really long thread someone tweeted the other day, and it was your classic FPP person.
Just whenever if you're writing tweets and it's more than say 3 or 4 tweets.
This was
long,
about 12.
Write a blog post.
Yes.
That's Twitter is a microblogging site. I quite like threads for maybe writing 2 or 3, maybe having, if you want to write something with pictures and, describe each picture.
Put a summary in, fine. Pick out some stats.
That's fine. Or you can have threads that you go back to over a period of, weeks or whatever. I've seen that done really good. But if you're just getting a blog post that's 3,000 words and just, it's suddenly going to be 40 tweets, I'm not interested.
Yeah. This one was fantastic. You'd have loved it. I don't know if it popped up on your feed. But it was your classic FBPE type. And it was all about the biggest lie, the biggest and most obvious lie. And it just went on and on and on and on. And it was about the fact that Britain will be a global trading nation after Brexit. It's just the biggest lie. It's such an obvious lie. It's just like, you can't possibly, if you're
it's so obvious, it's taken me 50 tweets to illustrate
and
it.
If you're a Brexiter, then you are a liar because of this. And I just retweeted it. Obviously, I've got no engagement from this guy at all. But I was like, your view of the world is that free trade, because he kept using the term free trade. You're leaving the largest free trade bloc in the world. Your view of free trade is that everyone has to join the EU. That's it. But that's not that the rest of the world is bigger. And
let's not forget that it's not free trade within the EU either. It's highly, highly regulated trade.
Yeah.
It's not free.
And it's protectionist trade. That's what it is. I think we should call it what it is. It's protectionist trade.
And you mentioned it before. We could probably go into this in more detail. But I think fundamentally the EU is a right-wing project. I think it's more right than left with its regulation, its control. It's not about nationalising everything. In fact, you can't really nationalise stuff.
The rules on state aid,
they're really strict.
Are pretty strict, but they do. You can do it though, and to be honest, I don't actually know. No, I don't know the specifics of that. All I know is how it relates to broadband provision. Because again, I come from the telecom sector. There's always a scheme. Boris is going to do it again, albeit that we'll be out of the EU. So I imagine that actually the money will be splashed far more in order to get us all fibre to the home in 5 years. Which, can I just say right now, and to everyone else, that won't happen. But yeah, you're right.
And this is another thing. So we could. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question here. This is not really related. Well, it's semi-related to what we've been talking about. But so I think people get things wrong about left and right because they don't really know what left and right is. People associate the left with statism.
Well, I think again, just to come back to your EU point, I think that a lot of people, even prominent people on the Leave side, consider the EU to be a left-wing institution, and that's it. I think it's just again a bit of a lack of critical thought about it.
It's a statist institution for sure,
yes,
but not all statism is of the left.
Yeah.
So I'm going to spring this on you now. This
Okay.
is just something that a question I thought I'd ask, and it's related to the left and the right, of course, but it's also related to what we've just been talking about like an institution.
Put me on the spot. You're looking very pleased with yourself.
Oh, no. I would like to spend more time on this at another point, because I think we could talk for a long time about this. The public sector.
Yeah.
Left or right? Yeah, as in civil servants. I mean.
Wow. But again, we've just highlighted there that it's both, because the NHS is nationalised, socialised, socialist healthcare.
I'm not talking about the doctors and nurses and everything.
But Ofcom is a regulator, and so it's entirely paid for by the state. You can argue that Ofcom as a regulator is owned by the state, and therefore is owned by, air quotes, the people. But its actions are right wing. So the institutions themselves are very much owned by the public. So they are all left. Anything that's owned by the state is left wing. That doesn't mean what they're doing is right wing.
I'm not entirely sure I agree that a regulator owned by the state is left wing.
Owned by the state. They have statified the regulations. The regulations themselves. There's only one form of regulations, and that's state regulations.
We've established that the right is all about.
I was talking about their actions. What they do. Yeah, but the institution itself has been nationalised.
So you can't have a right-wing government.
The right-wing people, the people who are there.
Can you have a right-wing government?
Can you have a right-wing government? Yes.
So can you have a right-wing regulator?
But the government institutions are left-wing because they are owned by the government.
I think that's a reach.
I'm just trying to be as specific as I can. You wanted to talk about this,
but because I'm
thinking on the fly.
I think the public sector is far more right-wing than people give it credit for, because of this order and this control. I'm not saying it's not left-wing at all. I'm just saying that there are
the concept of even them existing, because they are owned. I'm just going back to your definitions of ownership.
Think about how huge the public sector is and how much of it is right-wing, and it's all about control and regulation.
So, okay, I'm going to ask you a question back, not because I'm trying to avoid it.
I've just thought about this question, so I don't have a prepared answer at all.
That's fine.
I just thought it's something that we could discuss, about a dialectic.
The problem we have with the state is that it's a monopoly on everything. Yeah, and it's an artificial monopoly, and it's done by force, by coercion. You don't get a choice. Now, there are standards that exist. It's not the same as regulations. Standards tend to be voluntary. You might have to become your company or you might have to become a member of a body, of an organisation, a private organisation, or you can sign up to a set of standards. ISO is a great example of that. I'm sure someone's will come back and say that it was formed out of some government institution or something. I don't know the specific history of it, but there are.
Well, they've stolen a lot of stuff that started off in the private sector. So it's only fair that some of it comes the other way.
Anyway, but there are private standards that exist, and we're not against those. We're not against the concept of regulation if it's voluntary.
No, of course not.
It's the idea.
Of course not.
It's the idea that that you can't use it to compete in some way.
People are free to. So I might have really high standards when it comes to something.
Yes. That's my point.
But they're my standards.
The term regulation, even when you think about it, the term regulate is to smooth out the highs and the lows. It is to make regular, to make normal and the same. Okay.
We will decide what's good enough for you.
Yeah, and
we'll charge you for it.
The biggest issue with regulation for me is that it is by definition anti-competitive.
Of course.
You say of course, but people don't. People need to hear this. People don't hear this just because you've already got that way.
That's its biggest feature for big business.
Yes.
It's a barrier to entry.
Yes, and it means that if we're all going to have to do the same thing, then that's no longer something I can compete on. Now, some might argue that you can compete by going to a higher standard, but often you have to lower a standard to get to a regulation in order to comply with it. The point I was going to make is, if you spun off a regulator from the government and made it private and made it voluntary, and I can't think of an example of where that's ever happened.
It would cease to be a regulator at that point. It would be a standards organisation, presumably.
So can regulation only be from government?
What I would have to look up the definition of regulation.
Yeah,
because I'm not sure.
But that's why you can see why I'm asking that question, because I'm talking about whether or not the concept of an entity being owned by government is a left-wing notion, even though the actions of that entity might be right-wing.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That's what your question.
Convinced on that. Yeah.
I came right back to the fundamentals of your question, in terms of, yes, all state things must be leftist, even though the outcomes and the activities of the entities and organisations might be rightist.
Whereas I think both the left and the right can be statist,
and they are. I'm nitpicking,
and because it's not really, a regulator doesn't really have a means of production, for example. So it's not state ownership of production or public ownership of production, which is probably more.
But the public owns the regulator. Yeah. That's the point I was making. I'm
no,
splitting
it does
hairs.
the public own the regulator? I would argue that the public doesn't own the regulator. The same way that I would argue that the public doesn't own the NHS.
Right. Okay.
Public ownership.
Right.
It's an absolute myth.
It's a misnomer.
Where's my shares in the NHS?
Okay.
Right. Can I sell them and get the cash back? It's
right.
all rubbish.
Okay.
Would you like a scotch?
No. Yes. Absolutely. You put your little glass.
So these are from our other brother Simon.
Brother number 3. So you brought a little shot glass, little stainless steel shot
so
glasses.
he bought me this set years ago.
Okay.
This is some Singleton.
Oh, I've had Singletons. I drank my bottle of Singleton very quickly.
Yeah, it doesn't last very long.
I want to remember my point. So you're not. I'm totally with you. I want to talk about this misnomer, the absolute misnomer of public ownership.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really important. Cheers.
We're going to struggle to chink them, but
you're not going to be able to hear that. That is so nice. The Singleton of Dufftown. That's driving whiskey. That is.
That's lovely. Breakfast whiskey.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the state.
But you're not talking about You're not talking
ownership.
about here the concept of it being arm's length. You're not talking about the regulator because it is free, supposedly of democratic control. That it's free. It's just underpinned by statute and free of political interference. I mean, I would argue that's nonsense as well. But that's how a regulator is constituted, as opposed to being part of a department that is run by an MP that is or a member of the House of Lords that are responsible to cabinet and etc.
But even if we're talking about
a department and an agency are different.
But even if we're talking about these departments of making the rules, drafting up laws, that I would say is still, they don't have a means of production. I would say they are still right wing. That's still elite control.
So is the House of Commons a right wing institution then?
I would say so.
See, this is interesting. We've never got this far.
I would say so.
Is all law right wing?
I would say all law created by the current parliament.
Is democracy left wing or right wing?
See, we've had this discussion before, and I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it tends to be more of the left, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But again,
I love where this is going, though.
But the difference between the left and the right is that the left has shifted more, because the left wingers originally used to be the freedom fighters and the libertarians, are the ones who were railing against feudalism and the elite control of the right.
Yes.
Now the people against the elite control on the right are the socialists.
Yeah.
So there is it's not as easy.
Do you agree with me that the left these days, certainly the Labour Party, they love feudalism as a concept, and they just try to.
Do you mean as a straw man to try and?
If you let me finish my sentence, to just map onto anything else that's happening currently and the way that the Conservative Party or the right wingers behave. They lament the fact that it isn't as simple as just arguing that feudalism exists and that it needs to be smashed down. They want to make everything appear to be feudal.
Appear to be feudal, or
in order that they can smash it down. You're right. It is a straw
Or do you mean that they? Do you mean that they think that we're feudal now, or that that's where the evil Tories want to go to? What do you mean?
Certainly the second. Certainly the second one. I think they think the evil Tories is all about power and control. I think they see capitalism as feudal, and I think that they would see this as about having power. The rich, the rich and the evil capitalist, the Jeff Bezos with Amazon, and etc. They have power over you, just like the feudal lords had power over you. That's what they like. And it's classic class warfare. But now it's about capitalists and it's about the rich having power over you. Even though the only way they have power over you, if you can call it that, is I bought something from you that I wanted
Voluntarily.
Yeah, and wasn't forced to. And
continue to buy things from.
Exactly. So I think we could talk probably at length about the concept of power and what power is. And actually, I haven't come prepared for this conversation, but how the right and the left view power might be an interesting thing to talk about, because I think that the left characterise power in monetary terms a lot of the time these days, because there is the feudal lords owned the land.
Well,
that was feudalism.
Yeah, and there's lots of. I mean, it's called cultural Marxism now, where it used to be kind of about different classes, and now it's.
Is it? I don't know whether I necessarily like
different
that.
Different things have replaced. So, for example, when you're talking about identity politics, that's kind of replaced the class structure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cultural Marxism, because it's the same kind of pyramid that they display, where you've got the people at the top, which used to be the evil capitalists and the feudal landlords, and now it's the straight white men.
Yes, and maybe I've just been articulating cultural Marxism in those terms, but I think that it's interesting to talk about it in terms of power, because political power and economic power are two completely different things. Wouldn't you agree?
And they also have they talk about power. But they don't really define it in terms of power. So they'll talk talk about white privilege, and how anyone with white skin has privilege, even if they're homeless on the streets and they're on death's door, starving. White privilege. Whereas that person can be racist towards somebody, yet someone who is black and a millionaire cannot possibly be racist against that white homeless person.
Yes,
it's complete rubbish.
That's nonsense. But I'm going to bring it back to the big tech companies again, not least of which because they are the largest organisations in the world. That's just a fact now.
I don't think they beat the NHS.
Okay. Is the NHS bigger than Apple?
Well, it doesn't make as much money as Apple. It depends if you're talking size, but they're the fifth biggest.
Hold that thought.
Organisation in the world, aren't they?
Hold
there's
that
North Korean
thought.
Army and all sorts.
Or the Chinese Army, Chinese Air Force, whatever. Anyway, hold that thought, because I do want to come back to public ownership again. But again, the concept of power. The left think that Mark Zuckerberg has power over you. Yeah? I mean, he doesn't have power over me because I'm not on bloody Facebook, but that's something that I think that new technology has, that they've had to change their argument. Maybe this is where cultural Marxism, or what you want to call it, the replication of the class system has had to move to, because their arguments don't stack up anymore, because Facebook is free. The idea that that you can have a service that you don't pay for. I mean, is this capitalism's biggest trick? That now the largest organisations, the largest private organisations, okay,
most profitable organisations,
don't make their profit from the end user, from the consumer.
Yeah, it is.
But
it is an
you've
interesting
traded.
one.
I mean, they're finally getting into it, and the point is, and the negative spin is that you are their product. They're selling you to advertisers and your data, and they're stealing your data and they're taking.
But still, you look at the biggest organisations, those Microsoft, Apple, Amazon. They're still selling hard stuff. I mean, Facebook and Google and stuff are getting up there, but there are still products involved with some of the biggest companies.
And Amazon just shift. I mean, obviously they've got their software side, and they've got their smart speakers and data centers and all this kind of stuff. But they're a retailer. They're a shop. They're an online. In fact, they're a marketplace, which is important. And they will do the heavy lifting for you if you want. You don't have to. I mean, I don't know how much people know about how Amazon actually works, but they've obviously got the stuff that they sell. But then they've got the stuff that you or I could sell.
We could set up an Amazon storefront.
And get Amazon to sell it for us. The point being is, you could just use the Amazon storefront, but you could use the Amazon warehousing as well. You could get them to do end-to-end logistics, and they would come pick up, or you would have delivered to their warehouse a load of products, and then they would do everything for you. Or you could get them just to do the ordering and the payment side of things, and come and find my stuff on there, and then you would do the shipping and everything else. So they are facilitators, and they are, as you said, the shop front, but they will do everything for you if you want to. But you're right, there's a practical, physical thing there. But I think the tech giants thing is interesting, because both the left and the right, let's bring it back again, both the left and the right want to, am I right here? At the moment they're talking about both wanting to regulate. This is, again, it's not just as simple as left wingers are left wingers, right wingers are right wingers. Politicians in the Labour Party, including Magic Grandpa, who you addressed as earlier, will espouse regulation of the big tech giants. Now, obviously what they would love more is just to nationalise them.
Correct. See, I think the left go for regulation because it's all they think they can get.
Yeah, but it's just that it's not the purest. It's not the purest form.
No.
But let's come back to public ownership again, and I think that's an important one. The misnomer. It's not public ownership. Who does own the NHS? I'm asking you.
It's not me. I know that much.
So is this the state, in quotes, on our behalf?
Of course it is. The thing with the state is doing everything on our behalf, because it's just too complicated for us to we don't need to worry about it.
Your pretty little minds can't comprehend.
It's too complicated. There are too many decisions to be made. You let us do it for you. That's what it is. We will manage it, and we will own it on your behalf.
And so this I don't know what word to use, but it's a twisting of the term public, isn't it? Public ownership, and they will use terms like bringing back into public ownership and stuff like that.
Well, the whole idea of things being privatised, and leftists will list.
I hate that term.
Will list a number of things that have been privatised, with on the basis that, well, hang on, was everything nationalised first?
Yeah.
What's your standard here?
Yeah. I don't like
the fact
the
that
term.
the default to them is that the state should own everything is ridiculous.
Now, I know you'll agree with me that we don't like the terms private sector and public sector. For one thing, it normalises that both should exist in that way, and that the public sector should exist. Sector just sounds like there are these nice, clearly defined lines around these things. I don't know, it almost actually does say that it's quite easy for you to move between the two. But it should be one way. It should only ever be public to private. But the fact is, it could be in the public sector, it could be in the private sector. We'll have a debate about it, and we'll agree where things should be. I've heard I've heard better definitions. Obviously, there's the book that you gave me by Douglas Carswell talks about the productive and the parasitic, which I think is an excellent way of defining these things. But these terms don't stick. And if I just start saying, the parasitic sector, then you're just going to be hounded out of somewhere for being
the state sector or the free sector, and they
they
don't land.
But even sector, I don't like. Again, sector it says there are these very clear edges to this thing that you need to be in.
Well, let's face it,
the natural sector.
The amount of regulation that is in the air quotes private sector, it's not really the private sector anymore, because you have to do exactly what they say.
Yeah.
There's nothing is really truly private.
So is it the coercive?
I've heard it called the coercive sector before.
But what can you think of a better term for private sector that doesn't involve the word sector, first of all? The best I can come up with is free enterprise. But even then...
But you've got to acknowledge that doesn't really exist.
No, and it also...
So there needs to be like
doesn't include voluntary organisations. Enterprise you think of as being work and work for profit. Exactly. And trade.
But then there almost needs to be three. There needs to be there's the public sector, which we need to rename for state-owned stuff. There needs to be.
Are you talking about the third sector in terms of volunteering and
No. I'm talking about. So there's public as in state. There's the state-owned, the parasitic sector, as you mentioned earlier. Then there's the heavily regulated, slightly free sector.
But privately owned.
Privately owned but heavily regulated. And there's actual free enterprise, which is this unicorn that doesn't really seem to exist anywhere except in some places like Hong Kong and possibly Singapore.
But they exist when they're brand new and the state hasn't got a hold of them yet.
IT is the closest that we have because it can't catch up.
Agreed. And it was unregulated. And so because it appeared, it wasn't unregulated, it appeared, and it went from there. So there's your third sector. Are you going to include the fourth sector, pathfinders, after that?
Pathfinders?
Quiet bat people.
Who said that?
This was the thick of it. Do you not remember?
Was that Nicola Murray?
Yeah.
Yeah,
quiet bat people. Just anyone needs to look that up. I'm not going to go into it any more than that. But this was the fourth sector, pathfinders. They're basically vigilantes. But they're calmer. So that's why. Hence they're not bat men, because that would be too sexist. So it's bat people, but they're quiet. They're not as absolutely great. But yeah, I don't even like sector. But you're right. It's the regulated industry or.
I mean, my hope in
commerce is a good word to describe. I think anything that does sell something. That's different from the voluntary sector and the commercial sector, because the NHS isn't commercial, other than you'll go and pay for your parking. I mean, again, this concept that you don't pay for things that are in the public sector, ignoring tax. But you pay for stuff all the time.
I pay for my prescriptions.
Pay for prescriptions. You pay parking, all that kind of stuff.
I pay my time that I waste.
Yes. Where do you want to go from here?
I had something I was just about to say, and you carried on.
Sorry, but anyway, public sector ownership is the concept that we own it. As you said, I'm going to remind you of what you said. Where are my shares in this? If we did, then that would be something. I mean, I'm kind of surprised they didn't actually do it even as a SOP. Here are your shares. Here, we're going to give you. Look, you can log on and you can share. There's your share certificate. You own a part of the NHS.
Yeah, there'll be too many people like you and I saying, right, okay,
I want to sell it then.
I'm going to sell it. I'm not going to pay any more tax for it because I don't own it anymore.
Yeah.
That's where they're going right. So I've remembered what I was going to say.
I was planning for you.
My hope, this is going back to the regulation and things like the tech sector, which is pretty quick to adapt. My hope is that the more technologically advanced society gets,
I agree,
the harder it will be for governments to catch up with things like regulation, and they'll get to a point where they just can't do it anymore because they're too slow and innovation is happening too quickly that the state will have no purpose and it will just shrink. Won't be in our lifetimes. It's a pipe dream, but
because the problem is that regulation stifles innovation.
Yeah,
and so which is the other point. So one of the arguments I had on LinkedIn this week was over the concept that the EU should mandate by regulation that smartphones should only have USB-C.
I thought they did that. I thought they were doing that. They've been trying to do that for years.
They have, but I don't think it's been forced. I think it's been voluntary. I mean, Apple haven't done it. Apple have been getting around it, or they've been doing something. And of course, you have all these people. I'm there going, this is outrageous. This is ridiculous. You can't force it. People going, oh, it's so much easier. I don't know what you're talking about. This is a great regulation. And I was like, better? What's better than USB-C? When someone invents something that's better than the USB-C standard, then no one's allowed to implement it because you have to have USB-C.
Okay,
it's not going to encourage the creation of that thing.
Yeah, of course. Well, there'll be no point. Innovation will just cost you, and you won't get any benefit.
Exactly.
So, I mean, my question to these people is, okay, let's say that in your opinion, and for you personally, having USB-C is a great idea.
Yeah, and it might be now.
Okay, how many phones do you have?
Yeah, well, I've got one.
Yeah,
and it comes with a charger.
Buy one with USB-C.
Yeah.
Even if you need more than one phone.
Yeah.
If USB-C is such a big thing for you, then buy phones with USB-C. They exist.
Yeah, you can choose to.
Don't buy an iPhone.
Well, and this is it. The person I was having there's a couple of people, but one of the people I was having this discussion / argument with on LinkedIn, somehow making out that I was basically like an Apple shill, and they kept saying, "Oh well, Apple do this and Apple do that," and I'm like, "You haven't heard me defend Apple here once," and I don't particularly like Apple.
Well, you don't own any Apple products.
I don't own a single Apple product. I don't particularly like the way they have a closed ecosystem. I get why. They are the right wingers of the tech world. Okay, it's a closed ecosystem. You have to do things exactly. They love order, and they won't. Yeah, they don't let you install their software on other hardware. They don't let you do the vice versa. It's all about order, and they like the form and the control that you get with it. But I like the fact that they exist, and I like the fact that so many people buy their stuff means that they've created something that people want. But let people have choice,
and it influences other things as well. So
Absolutely.
Windows, Apple, Linux, they all copy each other.
Exactly, and they all keep each other on their toes. But when and again, people started pivoting towards wireless charging as a thing. I was like, again, I've got no problem with wireless charging. Obviously, if you mandate that something has to have a plug on it, and if you invent something that doesn't need a plug, then that is innovating past the idea of a plug. But the concept, what you're saying, and I asked this question, and of course this person pivoted completely away from answering this question. You are saying that the USB-C plug socket is perfection in plug socket terms. You're saying that there could be nothing possibly better and no possible improvement to the USB-C plug socket. And of course they went on to a different argument. They're like, I'm saying that everything, literally everything, can neither be improved or be superseded. I get that by moving to wireless charging you're superseding it, replacing the need for it. But even the plug, you can improve the plug. I guarantee you can improve that plug.
Well, so the Apple Lightning connector is better than the USB-C.
There we go then.
In my opinion.
But in your opinion?
Because it's smaller.
And do you know
it
what?
does exactly the same thing.
And do you know what? And I said, if there must be someone out there who's quite happy with their old micro USB-C stuff. For one thing, they might have a house full of micro USB-C cables.
Well, I would rather, if I was going back to something, if I had to have one connector for everything, for me, it would be the micro USB, because I have more things than a micro USB. I have more micro USB cables. Yeah. So for me at the moment,
it's not very environmentally friendly having to replace all of these cables and replace all of these phones. Right now, in fact, this is even better. So, I have a new phone. I've only had it a couple of months. I have a Google Pixel 4. So it's a very new phone that only came out in like October or whatever, and I pretty much got it, when it came out. USB-C, absolutely fine. It also has wireless charging, but there's more than one standard wireless charging. As soon as I plugged it into one of my existing USB-C chargers, in fact, a USB-C charger from a Google Pixel. So I went from the Google Pixel to the Google Pixel 4, and my wife's got a Google Pixel 3, and it's not that we haven't had other phones and other bits and pieces, and I tried a Huawei, and I decided to ditch my Chinese overlords and went to the Pixel. All of these were USB-C, but my Huawei charger just plain doesn't work. The Google Pixel 3 charger works with the Google Pixel charger, but neither of them will charge my Google Pixel 4 at a high speed, because you've now got quick charging, yeah? You've got these different standards for rapid charging is the term that they use. So yes, it charges my phone, but it does it at such a snail's pace. So I now have to go and replace all of my cables and my chargers.
All of your old USB-C chargers?
Yes. Because I need to charge my phone quickly. I want to charge. That is better for me to charge my phone quickly. And even though a rapid charger for USB-C works as to charge it slowly, why would I want to charge it slowly? The only place I've left those types of chargers is next to my bed, because I don't care as long as it takes less than 7 hours to charge, then it doesn't matter. But everywhere else I want quick charge, so we have to try and work out what the standards are and everything. I'm not moaning about the adoption of standards. I'm not moaning about things improving. I love the fact that my phone charges quicker. But the idea that all you have to do is say everyone needs to get USB-C and that will solve everything is nonsense, because people will innovate in other areas. Rant over about chargers.
Should we wind this up?
Probably should, because that wasn't a particularly left or right wing thing. But I like that we covered it. We went in some directions I didn't think we would go in then, in terms of defining and redefining things like public ownership and power. So, good topic.
Thank you. So, thank you for watching and listening to Sounding Board. If you're on YouTube, if you click the subscribe button, and I think it's a little bell, which means you get notified whenever we release new podcasts. And whichever podcast app you're using, you can subscribe to us and give us a rating. And please share us with your friends.
Thanks for listening and watching.